Okay, this is your session 1 lecture video. Make sure that you have completed the assigned reading before you begin the lecture, as I will not cover everything within the textbook because I need to make sure that you have done that assigned reading. So we're first going to get started with covering the function of the family unit. Believe it or not, there is a reason why families exist in society, and it is to provide individuals with values and norms and show them the way to exist in a stable society. So we see that the primary functions of family serve to replenish society with socialized members. Family units are supposed to promote emotional stability of their members, so provide them a safe place to live, a safe place to be loved and to exist. They're supposed to provide care, so care for adults that are sick, care for infants and children that cannot care for themselves. They are supposed to provide economic support to their members. So when we're talking about economic support, we're supposed to provide the food that our children need. We're supposed to provide the clothing that they need, the shelter that they need. And part of that economic support ties into social status. So our families provide our social placement within society, our social class within society. And then social control is another function of a family unit, and that is to explain that better. It's in high quality, durable family units. Social control means there is less criminal behavior, less unsocialized behavior. So we would put this in typical terms of saying those people act normal when they have a high quality functioning family unit. So you might look at some of these and you may see that a lot of times children that grow up in environments that don't have these things may not function well in society. So I'm going to jump down here to the frameworks. These things are in your book, so I want you to spend some time reading through those. They're also part of your notes. I'm not going to spend time here because they're in your textbook, but I want to highlight them for you so you understanding how these notes work when it pertains to I'm giving a lecture and requiring you to read some in your textbook. So our chapter kind of focuses on introducing that idea of marriage and how it relates to families. And so just keeping in mind that marriage originated as a legal contract between two individuals. Obviously, that who those individuals are have changed over the years, but it is still a legal contract of a relationship. And technically, that relationship deals with income and debt. We see that in the past, so the statistic from 1960 is that 72% of people got married and stayed married, and now that's dropped to about 50%. We know that marriage is delayed now, and we know that marriage is much more emotional now instead of just expected. So marriage has definitely changed, but the concept of that legal relationship still exists. So you'll see this in your book, the benefits of marriage versus the liabilities of singlehood. So I want you to spend some time looking through that. This is just really neat to look at the statistics of how marriage or singlehood affects us. So I want to talk to you about the societal changes that occurred in about a 30-year span in the United States and how those changes in our society really affected marriage and family. And again, that's the topic of our course. And so we're going to talk about what happened here. So from the 40s to the 70s, Lots of family values changed, and that's because we experienced the Great Depression. We got through that. Our economy started to recover. We had that baby boom, that post-war era explosion. Civil rights and social justice became a huge movement. We also had a huge movement of feminism. That myth of the male breadwinner kind of went out the door. Jobs, education became accessible to both genders, not just one. And those large societal changes really altered the meaning of what marriage was. So we moved away from the traditional view and we moved towards more of the individualized view. It became much more of a choice. It became much more tied to emotion. So we're going to look at the changing family unit through the 3 theories of sociology. And I hope I have covered that enough to where you kind of will understand when I start to review these. So when we look at structural functionalism, so we're looking at the changing family unit through the lens of structural functionalism. We see that prior to the industrialization era, so way back when, I'll use that term, the family unit was an economic team. And they were an economic team because most families existed based upon their farm life. Each member of that family had a distinct function. They worked together, and they worked together for the common good of continuing to live. They had to. This meant, husbands had roles, wives had roles, children had roles. Everybody had their own roles, their own responsibilities, and everybody kind of worked together harmoniously because they had to depend on each other in order to survive. And this created really strong family values and family bonds. And there was very little divorce rate because you couldn't divorce because you couldn't survive on your own without all members of your family working together. So just think back to way back when and that farm life culture. And then we look at what happened after the post-industrialization era. So kind of what started in the 1940s and moved on to the 70s. Those traditional functions of the family unit sort of ceased to exist. So many more people were leaving the country, moving into the cities, and men and women were being educated and hired in all sorts of jobs outside of that home. And so this eliminated that need for tightly bound family units working together. And so that created a sense of individualism. So paychecks became attached to an individual, so the man or the woman. And that kind of broke up that traditional family unit as we knew it in society. And so families really did not share a lot of the same functions anymore. And that created fragile bonds. And we see the structure of the family started to exist beyond marriage, and divorces occurred, and less marriages began to form. And so it just totally changed the structure of the family or the structure of marriage in general. And now we're going to move into conflict theory. So conflict theory, remember, is that fight, that struggle for power. And so when we look at conflict theory and the changing family, we look at divorce rates. Post-industrialization, women could work outside the home and they could earn income to support themselves. Therefore, they didn't have to get married. They didn't have to immediately begin having children so they could create their own little workforce in their area. And this gave women the power to move away from that typical, the man is dominating and in charge of the family structure. And so it empowered women to leave marriages that were filled with domination and abuse, and it gave them a new power. that encourage them to live on their own. And so when we look at marriage through conflict theory, conflict theorists don't necessarily agree that marriage weakened. It just is explaining how women are now more empowered to make that decision for themselves, and how they necessarily don't have to engage in marriage in order to survive, like we see women used to in the long distance past. And then if we look at family change through symbolic interactionism, remember this is a very individualized approach here. And so when we are looking at symbolic interactionism, we're gonna tie emotion to this because it's individualized. So it really wasn't until emotions and feelings entered the arena for mate selection that marriage even became based upon attraction and intimate feelings. So there was no more need for that economic obligation to run a farm. It kind of moved into this emotion of love and who I love and who makes me feel the best. And so we also look at the divorce rate here. So divorce, the meaning of divorce changed for the individual as well. So the old meaning was there was a huge failure. There was something wrong with the family dynamics. But divorce kind of changed in this view of I'm free. I have a way to begin my life again. And so symbolic interactionism, applying that thought process of what divorce means to society, changed. And that is how we apply these individual thoughts when we are looking at social aspects of society. And the symbolic meaning of the family or of divorce or of marriage actually, really transition through this period. Your book also touches on some family changes. It talks about how life was in the 50s versus how life is now in the 2020s. So spend some time there really expanding on your thought process of these changes. It's very interesting to look at subtle changes over time and how they seem very vast once we get through a span of 30, 40, 50 years. And then lastly, I just want to wrap up with some of these summary questions, these reflections. Thinking about when you're typing them in your notes, really think clearly about what happens when the family unit fails to function properly and how that affects society. So we see that throughout this lecture and throughout this time period. And then, think about how this might apply to you and your process as you are either managing a family unit or either planning to one day manage a family unit. So really go back to those family functions and, do you have the resources to provide all of those family functions to your family? And if you don't, what should you do prior to building that family unit? So please reach out to me if you have any additional questions. Make sure that you go back and read and review these sections of the textbook so you have a really thorough understanding of marriage and the changing family.